"Who hurt you, Mommy?" the maid's toddler asked at dinner. Then everyone looked at the fiancé. "You need to hear this." A 3-year-old girl asked one simple question at a billionaire's dinner table, and it made a grown woman's fork drop to the floor. Nobody in that room was prepared for what came next. The maid froze. The billionaire's fiancé went pale. And a little girl who couldn't even tie her own shoes was about to expose a secret that had been hidden for months. What happened at that table would change 3 lives forever. And it all started with 4 innocent words. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we start, tell me, where are you watching from today? Which country do you belong to? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Today's story is one of the most emotional ones we've shared. It's about a single mother, a little girl with the purest heart, and a truth that no one saw coming. Stay with me until the end because this one is going to stay with you for a long time. She scrubbed floors by day and dreamed by night, until one dinner changed everything. Maria Delgado was 30 years old, and she had learned a long time ago that dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise in the small servants' quarters behind the Whitmore mansion, got her daughter Sophia dressed and fed, and started her 12-hour shift as the household maid. Sophia was 3 years old, with curly dark hair and eyes that seemed to notice everything, even things adults tried hard to hide. Maria worked for Ethan Whitmore, a 34-year-old billionaire who had inherited his family's real estate empire and multiplied it tenfold through his own hard work. Ethan was known across the country as a sharp, no-nonsense businessman, but inside the walls of his own home, he was quieter, more guarded. He had lost his mother young, and he carried a certain loneliness that no amount of money could fix. Maria had worked for the Whitmore family for almost 2 years. She kept the house running, the laundry, the meals, the small details that made a mansion feel like a home. Ethan barely noticed her most days. The way busy, powerful men often don't notice the people who make their lives function. But Sophia noticed him. She would peek around corners to watch him work in his study, and sometimes when he wasn't looking, he would leave a cookie on the kitchen counter just for her. 6 months ago, everything in the house changed when Ethan got engaged to Vanessa Cole, a 30-year-old woman who had grown up in the same social circles as Ethan's late mother. Vanessa was beautiful, polished, and knew exactly how to charm a room full of investors. To the outside world, she was the perfect match for a man like Ethan. Elegant, articulate, and always dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine. But Maria noticed something the guests never saw. Behind closed doors, Vanessa was different. She was sharp-tongued with the staff, dismissive of anyone she considered beneath her, and there was a coldness in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. Maria kept her head down. She needed this job. Rent didn't pay itself, and Sophia's daycare wasn't cheap. She told herself it wasn't her business how Vanessa behaved when the cameras weren't rolling. Still, small things bothered Maria. Late at night, she sometimes heard raised voices coming from Vanessa's guest suite. A phone call, hushed but tense, cut short the moment footsteps approached. Once, Maria found a torn piece of paper in the trash with numbers and a name she didn't recognize, quickly disposed of like it was something to hide. She didn't think much of it at the time. People had secrets. It wasn't her place to ask questions. What worried Maria more was how Vanessa treated Sophia. Most people melted at the sight of a curious toddler, but Vanessa seemed almost irritated whenever Sophia wandered too close, whenever she looked at Ethan with that innocent, adoring gaze children give to people who are kind to them. Vanessa would exchange sharp looks with Maria, silent reminders that the maid's daughter didn't belong in certain rooms, at certain tables, in certain conversations. The wedding was 2 months away, and the Whitmore mansion had become a whirlwind of caterers, florists, and wedding planners rushing in and out every day. Ethan, despite his busy schedule, insisted on having a formal family dinner once a week, a tradition his mother had started years ago. A moment to slow down, sit at the table, and actually talk. He always insisted the staff eat properly too, though Vanessa clearly disapproved of that old-fashioned generosity. On this particular evening, Ethan made an unusual request. He asked Maria and Sophia to join the dinner table instead of eating separately in the kitchen, as they usually did. It wasn't the first time he'd done this. Every few weeks, when the house felt too quiet, he liked having a little noise around, and Sophia's laughter filled empty spaces he didn't know how to fill himself. Vanessa's jaw tightened when she heard the request, but she said nothing, plastering on the same practiced smile she always wore around Ethan. Maria sat at the edge of the table, Sophia in a booster seat beside her, quietly grateful but slightly nervous. She could feel Vanessa's eyes on her throughout the meal, cold and assessing, like she was being measured and found lacking. Sophia, of course, had no idea about any of the tension in the room. She was simply happy to be at a big table with pretty plates, happy to sit near Ethan, whom she'd started calling Mr. E in her own toddler way, and happy to be eating mashed potatoes that she insisted on calling cloud food. As the dinner went on, the adults made small talk about wedding flowers and guest lists. Vanessa spoke animatedly about her vision for the big day. White roses, imported silk, a string quartet flown in from Vienna. Ethan nodded along, though his eyes occasionally drifted toward Sophia, who was humming softly to herself while stacking peas on her fork. Then, out of nowhere, in the middle of a conversation about seating arrangements, Sophia looked directly at Vanessa. She tilted her head the way small children do when something doesn't add up in their minds, and in the sweet, unfiltered voice only a toddler could have, she asked a question that stopped every single person at that table cold. Nobody expected the next 4 words that came out of Sophia's mouth, and the room would never be the same. One innocent question, one dropped fork, and a secret that had been hiding in plain sight. "Who hurt you, Mommy?" The words hung in the air like they'd been shouted, even though Sophia had said them so softly, so innocently, that at first no one was sure they'd heard correctly. She wasn't looking at Maria when she said it. She was looking straight at Vanessa. Vanessa's fork clattered against her plate. For a split second, her carefully composed face cracked. Just a flicker, but Maria saw it, and so did Ethan. "I'm sorry, what did she say?" Ethan asked, setting down his glass. Sophia, unaware of the storm she'd just stirred, pointed one small finger toward Vanessa's wrist, which was mostly hidden beneath the long sleeve of her designer blouse. "She has a boo-boo. Like Mommy's boo-boo. I saw it in the bathroom." The table went silent except for the soft clinking of the chandelier overhead, disturbed by the air conditioning. Maria's stomach dropped. She reached over instinctively, trying to gently redirect her daughter's attention. "Sophia, sweetie, let's finish your dinner." But Sophia, in the way that only toddlers can, was not finished. "Mommy said don't tell anybody about the bad man who calls her. But you're not supposed to have boo-boos before the wedding, right? Mr. E said brides are supposed to be happy." Ethan's eyes moved slowly from Sophia to Vanessa. Vanessa let out a strained laugh, waving a dismissive hand. "Kids say the funniest things, don't they? I bumped my wrist on the car door last week, that's all. Nothing dramatic." Her smile was too wide too fast. But Maria's mind was racing. She thought back to the torn paper in the trash, the hushed phone calls late at night, the way Vanessa sometimes wore long sleeves even in the summer heat, something Maria had noticed but never dared question. She thought about the one time she'd walked into the guest bathroom to clean and found Vanessa sitting on the edge of the tub, quietly pressing a cold washcloth to her forearm, quickly hiding it the moment she saw Maria in the doorway. Maria hadn't said anything then. It wasn't her place. But now, with her daughter's innocent words hanging over the table, the walls Maria had built around her own suspicions were starting to crack too. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice carefully even, though there was a tightness underneath it that Maria hadn't heard before. "Vanessa, can we talk after dinner?" "There's nothing to talk about," Vanessa said quickly, her smile faltering at the edges. "She's 3, Ethan. She probably saw a bruise from tennis or something and got confused." Sophia, sensing the tension but not understanding it, looked at her mother with wide, worried eyes. "Did I do something bad, Mommy?" Maria squeezed her daughter's hand under the table. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." The rest of the dinner passed in an uncomfortable blur. Vanessa steered every conversation back to safe topics: the caterer's new menu, the wedding invitations that had just arrived from the printer, but her voice had lost its usual smooth confidence. Ethan barely spoke for the rest of the meal, his mind clearly somewhere else, replaying his fiancée's reaction over and over. After dinner, Maria took Sophia to get ready for bed, her hands trembling slightly as she brushed her daughter's hair. She told herself it wasn't her business, that she needed this job, that stirring up trouble in a billionaire's household could cost her everything. But she couldn't shake the image of Vanessa in the bathroom that day, the fear in her eyes, so different from the confident mask she wore in public. Later that night, as Maria was locking up the kitchen, she overheard Ethan's raised voice coming from the study, the first time she had ever heard him raise his voice in that house. She couldn't make out most of the words, but she heard enough. "Tell me the truth, Vanessa. Who is calling you? Why do you flinch every time your phone rings?" Vanessa's response was muffled, defensive, and then Maria heard something that made her blood run cold. The unmistakable sound of Vanessa breaking down in tears, not the practiced tears of someone caught in a lie, but the raw, exhausted sobbing of someone who had been carrying something heavy for far too long. Maria stood frozen in the hallway, torn between walking away and finding out the truth. What Maria overheard next would reveal a secret far darker than anyone at that table could have imagined. The truth Vanessa had been hiding wasn't the one anyone expected, and it changed everything. Maria knew she shouldn't be listening. She told herself to walk away, to go check on Sophia, to mind her own business like she always did. But something kept her rooted to that spot in the hallway, some instinct that told her this mattered. "Vanessa, please." Ethan's voice was softer now, pleading rather than accusing. "I'm not angry. I just need to understand." Sophia said, "The bad man who calls her." What did she mean by that? There was a long pause, filled only with Vanessa's ragged breathing. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, nothing like the confident, polished woman Maria had come to know. "His name is Marcus," Vanessa whispered. "He's my ex-fiancé. From 3 years ago, before I ever met you." Ethan's voice remained gentle. "Go on." "I left him because he was controlling, possessive. It started small, checking my phone, telling me who I could and couldn't see. Then it got worse. He hit me once, and I told myself it was the only time, that it would never happen again. But it did happen again. And again. I finally left in the middle of the night with 2 suitcases and never looked back." Maria's heart clenched. This wasn't the scheming, cold-hearted secret she had half expected. This was pain. 3 months ago," Vanessa continued, her voice breaking, "he found out about our engagement. He started calling, threatening to show up at the wedding, to tell everyone lies about me, to ruin everything I've built for myself. Last week he found out where I was staying and showed up outside the gate. I panicked and tried to leave quickly, and I twisted my wrist on the car door trying to get away from him. That's the truth. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to see me as broken, Ethan. I didn't want you to look at me the way people looked at me back then, like damaged goods." Ethan's voice cracked with emotion Maria had never heard from him before. "Vanessa, you're not damaged. Why didn't you trust me with this?" "Because I've spent 3 years rebuilding an image of a woman who has it all together," Vanessa said. "I was scared that if you saw the truth you'd leave. Rich men like you don't marry women with messy pasts, Ethan. You marry women who make you look good at galas." There was a heavy silence, and then Ethan's voice, firm but full of warmth. "Vanessa, I fell in love with you, not an image. If this man is threatening you, we need to get security involved immediately. We need to protect you. And honestly, we need to protect Sophia and Maria too, since he showed up at this house." Maria's breath caught at the mention of her daughter's safety. She hadn't even considered that the danger could extend beyond Vanessa. Inside the study, Vanessa was quiet for a moment before speaking again, her voice thick with tears. "There's something else. I was going to tell you eventually, but I was terrified of how you'd react. Marcus isn't just angry about the breakup. He's angry because he believes I took something from him when I left. Money he claims he's owed from a joint account we had years ago. He's been threatening to sue, to go to the press, to say I'm marrying you for money, and abandoned him penniless. None of it is true, Ethan, but he's convincing and he's dangerous." Ethan's response was immediate and unwavering. "Then we handle it together. I'll call my lawyer first thing tomorrow, and I'm hiring additional security for the house immediately. You are not going through this alone anymore." Maria stood in that hallway, tears quietly slipping down her own cheeks, overwhelmed by what she had just witnessed. She had spent months quietly judging Vanessa, assuming the worst about a woman who was, in reality, fighting a private battle no one else could see. She thought about how quick she had been to label Vanessa as cold and cruel, without knowing the fear that lived underneath that polished exterior. But there was something else weighing on Maria's mind now, the realization that danger might be closer to her own daughter than she had ever imagined. If this man Marcus was unstable enough to show up at the gate once, what would stop him from coming back? The next morning, Maria walked into the kitchen to find the household already buzzing with unfamiliar faces. 2 new security guards stationed at the main entrance, another patrolling the perimeter of the estate. Ethan had wasted no time. Vanessa found Maria in the pantry that afternoon. Her eyes red-rimmed but her posture steadier than Maria had seen it in weeks. "Maria," she said quietly, "I owe you and Sophia an apology. I've been cold to both of you these past months, and it wasn't fair. I was scared, and I took it out on people who didn't deserve it." Maria, unsure of what to say, simply nodded. Sophia didn't mean to expose anything. She's just a child who notices things. "I know," Vanessa said, a small, genuine smile breaking through for the first time. "And I think that little girl might have just saved me from carrying this secret alone for years." But the danger wasn't over yet, and what happened next would test everyone in that house. Just when the household thought the worst was behind them, Marcus made his move, and this time it was personal. 3 days after the confrontation in the study, the peace in the Whitmore household was shattered once again. Maria was in the garden with Sophia, letting her chase butterflies near the fountain while enjoying a rare quiet afternoon, when one of the new security guards came rushing across the lawn, speaking urgently into his radio. A man matching Marcus's description had been spotted trying to climb over the back fence, near the section of the property that bordered a quiet residential street with no cameras. Within minutes, the estate went into a controlled lockdown. Maria scooped Sophia into her arms and hurried inside, her heart pounding. Ethan arrived home from a business meeting within the hour, his face tight with barely controlled anger. Vanessa, though visibly shaken, remained calmer than Maria expected, as though a part of her had been steeling herself for this moment for months. The police were called, and after a tense search of the property, they found Marcus hiding in the old groundskeeper's shed near the back fence, having climbed over during a moment when the newly hired guards hadn't yet finished securing the entire perimeter. He was detained on the spot, and it quickly came out during police questioning that he had been surveilling the property for days, watching the family's routines, waiting for an opportunity to confront Vanessa alone. In his bag, officers found notes he'd been keeping, details about Vanessa's schedule, photographs taken from a distance, and disturbing writings about making her pay for leaving him. It was far more calculated and dangerous than anyone in the house had realized. Vanessa broke down when she heard the details, not out of fear this time, but out of a strange, overwhelming relief. The relief of finally having proof, of finally being believed, of no longer carrying this burden in silence. That night, after the police had left and the property was secured once more, Ethan sat with Vanessa in the living room, holding her hand as she finally let herself cry without holding back. Maria, standing quietly in the doorway with Sophia asleep in her arms, watched the two of them with a lump in her throat. "I should have told you the moment it started," Vanessa admitted. "I was so afraid you'd think less of me." "You're the strongest person I know," Ethan said firmly. "You survived something horrible, rebuilt your life, and never let it define you until fear made you hide it. That's not weakness, Vanessa. That's resilience." Over the following days, life at the Whitmore estate began to shift in quiet, meaningful ways. Vanessa, freed from the weight of her secret, became noticeably warmer, not just with Ethan but with the staff and especially with Maria and Sophia. She started joining them for the weekly family dinners without complaint, sometimes even requesting that Sophia sit beside her instead of at the far end of the table. One afternoon, Vanessa found Maria folding laundry in the linen room and hesitated in the doorway before speaking. "I wanted to properly thank you," she said. "And Sophia." If she hadn't asked that question at dinner, I don't know how much longer I would have hidden all of this. I might have married Ethan with this secret still eating away at me, still terrified every time my phone rang. Your daughter, without even knowing it, gave me the courage to finally tell the truth. Maria smiled softly. Kids see more than we think they do. They just say what we're too afraid to say ourselves. Vanessa nodded, her eyes glistening. "I know I wasn't kind to you before. I was drowning in my own fear, and I took it out on the people around me instead of facing it. I'm sorry for that." "You don't have to apologize," Maria said gently. "We've all been through things we don't talk about." There was a pause, and then Vanessa asked a question that surprised Maria. "What about you?" Sophia mentioned a bad man too, the night of the dinner, in her own confused way. "Is there something you've been carrying as well?" Maria hesitated, memories of Sophia's father flickering through her mind. A man who had walked away the moment he found out Maria was pregnant, leaving her to build a life alone with nothing but determination and love for her daughter. It wasn't the same kind of danger Vanessa had faced, but it was its own kind of pain, its own kind of quiet survival. "It's a long story," Maria said softly. "But I think, for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to tell it anymore." What Maria shared next would bring the two women closer than either of them ever expected, and change the course of her life forever. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the biggest truth, and this ending proves it. Over the weeks that followed, Maria found herself opening up to Vanessa in ways she never imagined she would with someone from such a different world. She told her about Sophia's father, about the nights she cried herself to sleep wondering how she'd provide for her daughter alone, about the pride she felt every single day watching Sophia grow into a bright, curious little girl despite everything. Vanessa listened without judgment and in turn shared more of her own story. The years of therapy it had taken to rebuild her confidence after leaving Marcus, the fear of never being seen as anything other than the woman who got out, and the slow, difficult process of learning to trust again. The two women, who had started as employers' fiancé and household staff, distant and guarded around one another, found an unexpected friendship growing between them, built on shared pain and mutual understanding. Ethan, watching this transformation happen in his own home, made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. With the wedding just 3 weeks away, he sat Maria down in his study one afternoon. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he said. "About how Sophia's honesty exposed a truth that could have saved Vanessa from a lot of pain, and possibly from real danger. I want to do something for you and Sophia, something that reflects how much this family owes you both." He explained that he wanted to fully fund Sophia's education, from preschool through college, set up in a trust that could never be touched by anyone but her. He also offered Maria a position managing the household staff with a substantial raise, along with a private apartment on the estate grounds instead of the small servants' quarters she'd been living in. Maria, overwhelmed, tried to protest that it was too much, that she hadn't done anything special, that Sophia had simply said what any child might say. But Ethan shook his head. "Sometimes the people who help us the most don't even realize they're doing it," he said. "Your daughter's innocence broke through walls that grown adults spend years building. That's not nothing, Maria. That's everything." The day of the wedding arrived, bright and warm. The Whitmore estate transformed into a breathtaking display of white roses and soft golden lighting, exactly as Vanessa had envisioned months before, back when she was still hiding behind a mask of forced perfection. But the woman who walked down the aisle that day was different from the one who had first arrived at that house. Lighter, freer, unburdened by secrets. Sophia, dressed in a tiny white dress, was given the honor of being the flower girl, scattering rose petals down the aisle with the same unfiltered joy she brought to everything in her small life. As she reached the front of the aisle, she paused, looked up at Vanessa standing radiant in her wedding gown, and said loudly enough for the front rows to hear, "You don't have boo-boos anymore." The crowd, unaware of the deeper meaning behind those words, laughed warmly, charmed by the sweetness of a toddler's innocent observation. But Vanessa, Ethan, and Maria exchanged a knowing look, understanding the full weight of what that simple sentence truly meant. As the ceremony continued and vows were exchanged, Maria stood near the back with tears in her eyes, watching the family she had once served transform into something that felt, in its own way, like her own family too. This story reminds us of something we often forget in our busy, guarded adult lives. That honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it comes from the smallest and most unexpected voices, has the power to heal what silence only makes worse. Vanessa carried her pain alone because she was afraid of being seen as broken, but true strength was never about hiding your scars. It was about finding the courage to show them. Sophia never set out to expose anyone's secret. She simply asked a question with the purest intention a child can have, genuine concern for someone she cared about. And in doing so, she taught every adult in that room a lesson about the power of speaking the truth, no matter how small or unqualified you might feel to say it. If this story touched your heart today, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one, and share it with someone you love. You never know who might need to hear that it's okay to stop hiding, and that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply tell the truth. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.